Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our webinar with Nick. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Yocheved, and I am a fourth-year physiotherapy student from WITS, and I am the chairperson of the WITS Physio Student Council. So thank you all for joining us tonight. We are really happy, proud to have this event, and we are very, very lucky to have such an amazing speaker come speak to us this evening. So before we start, just a few etiquette rules. If you could please put your mic on mute throughout the evening, that would be great. When someone's speaking, and then you are more than welcome and encouraged, if you would like, to put your video cameras on. So basically, the reason why we decided to have these webinars is because it is Physiotherapy Month, and we are really lucky and blessed to be in such a wonderful profession, and oftentimes days, weeks, months go by without us actually acknowledging what we have and looking into it. So yeah, just to create a bit more awareness and excitement of the profession vibes. So yeah, basically, without further ado, I'm going to introduce our guest speaker, Nick. Nick is a physio who has done amazing things, and he's going to tell us a bit about what he's done, and then we're going to progress through the evening with questions and answers. So if you do have questions, feel free to put them in the chat box. We can get a discussion going, but for the first 40 minutes, we won't be taking lots of questions unless they're on the chat box, and then towards the end, you can unmute and you can ask the questions yourself. So yeah, hope you guys enjoy. And Nick, if you can just tell us a bit about yourself, about your journey, your personal and professional accomplishments, that would be great.
Okay, thank you so much for having me to the WITS Student Society. And Yocheved, thank you so much for setting it all up and tolerating my voice notes while driving and like early hours when I'm feeding my kid messages. So thank you for that. My name is Nick, and I'm a physio. And yeah, I'm from Cape Town originally, but I'm currently based in KZN, and I've been here since 2014. Let me take it all the way back to the beginning. I did my undergrad at Stellenbosch. Then I went to the Eastern Cape, rural Eastern Cape, for my community service. Then I moved to KZN, and I started working in outpatient sports, and I was sort of a junior in a professional sports team. One thing leads to another. I start getting involved in more sports teams, different sports teams, kind of work my way up through a few organizations, end up opening my own practice. And yeah, I think that was halfway through 2016. So what's that? 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 5 years later, maybe somewhere around there. Here we are.
Amazing. That's very cool. So I'm sure some of you guys may follow Nick on Instagram, quite the social media guru over there, a couple thousand followers. And Nick often discusses certain aspects and certain ideas on his Instagram page. So one of the things, Nick, that you mentioned recently in one of your Instagram TVs, I think the title was "Learning is Winning," and I thought it was such a great video. It's very empowering because, you know, sometimes we feel so let down or bogged down by life's challenges, and we don't know how we can kind of get out of that. Now, a lot of us are in our undergrad. We still have a very much structured learning system. There are certain structures that are in place for us to have formal education. But I think for a lot of us in fourth year, or even during our undergrad or going into ComSurf and beyond, it's often a very daunting thought to know that now we don't have that constant input and learning environment. And what would you say, what advice would you give to physios to kind of have that mindset of winning, of learning, to make every experience a learning experience? How should we go about doing that?
It's a good question, and probably a really long answer as well. But I think there's something that I always go back to, that the more I learn, or the more I learn and grow, the more I know that there's things that I don't know. And I think just acknowledging that is probably the first thing. And you're never going to know everything about everything. So comparing yourself to what you were yesterday, or what you knew yesterday, is probably one way to see that you are making, like, gradual progress. I think physio is such a broad field, right? There's the hospital parts, cardiopulmonary, neurology, and I just work in one small little niche part, which is sports and teams physio, and then also sports and orthopedics injuries. So I think for me, being able to narrow it down into one field has made it a bit easier. But even in that, even completed a postgrad in that, have a master's in sports and exercise, but still realize that there's a mountain that I don't know. So it's a continuous cycle. Maybe we must manage our expectations and be a bit more gentle with ourselves, that, okay, you're not always expected to know everything. But for the people that I work with, and whether it's a mentorship thing, or, the people in my sort of practice, in my group, I think the expectation is that at least you're trying and making an effort to learn. And sometimes when I work with people that are like you're in your fourth year, when you come out into the clinical world, you probably know the most compared to people in like the first 5 years post practice, because you are the most up to date, you've just graduated, all that sort of stuff. But what I always say is that the skill set that you probably need to work on the most is more the non-clinical skills, unless you're diving into an area that's like, you going straight into a sports team, or you're going straight into an ICU hospital and you're going to work in ICU for the foreseeable future type of thing. Unless that's your situation, right, you probably don't need as much technical skill, and you maybe need a little bit more like the personal development part, the communication part, like broader reading outside physio. How can I be a leader? How can I manage my time better? How can I make learning a lifelong habit? Yeah, those sorts of things. So, I mean, I don't know if I even answered your question, but you're never going to know everything. It's a lifelong process. And I think we must move away from this black and white, this is the way it is. It's 6 times 3 mobs, and then I'm done at a grade 2 amplitude and whatever, right? Be a bit more flexible and contextual about things. And maybe we need to focus on not always what the textbook says or our lecturer says, but what's best for the patient in front of us. But I do understand that at an undergrad level, it's like learning to drive. You've got to do the things that the K53 says to pass and get out of there. But just know that there's a broader world that you might have to then step out of that, like approach to learning when you move beyond your sort of graduate years.
Yes, I think that's something that I've often spoken about with my peers, that it's quite difficult to, when there's so much and it's so broad, to have kind of those guidelines, grade 3 mobs for 2 minutes, whatever, like that's helpful in that instance. But as you grow as a clinician, that stuff sort of becomes second nature, and you need to improve your clinical reasoning to improve that. But in terms of learning more, would you say that learning in terms of formal learning, like doing courses, CPD courses, or informal learning, like going, I guess even something like this is a set of informal learning, Instagram. I mean, I've learned so much personally from so many physios on Instagram. Would you say that it is very important to kind of surround yourself with physio? or is it better to kind of separate it?
I think there's different phases for your career, right? So I did a talk, I did a like how do you call it? Like a leadership thing, but at a school level. And I said to the scholars, kind of, if you look at your career, right, and let's say your career starts at, your professional life starts at 25. As physios, we probably get a little bit of a head start there, right? But you do 10 years from 25 to 35, then you do 20 years in that middle block, and then you finish to retirement with another 10 years at the end. So for me, I'm still in that first 10-year block, which is still early. If you half that 10-year block, okay, and there's probably half of it where you really need to hammer down the clinical parts of things, and then the second part you can maybe start to work on the other pieces. You can kind of build yourself like almost like a toolbox. I think this is what I did if I break the two up. In my first 5 was heavily focused on learning, formally learning through experience, and then learning through like informal resources. So to be honest, in my first 5 years, I don't think I was the most qualified physio in terms of CPD courses and things, but I was working like to the point of, like absurdity, getting crazy experience, traveling with sports teams, saying yes to every opportunity. Like forget 21 days off a year, I was working like cheapest January 4th or 6th till all the way through to like the 22nd of December, literally for like 2-3 years straight, just because I had the opportunities to do that. And, so learn through experience is one, learn through formal. And I think, especially because of COVID, there's been so much more resources and CPD stuff that have come online. I was waiting for my chance to become a CPD like educator, and pre-COVID I did one, right? Post-COVID there was a period of like 6 months where I almost did one every single month for 6 months, because I was preparing for the opportunity, suddenly the opportunity arose and I was ready for it, right? So there's formal parts, but there's also informal parts, like you say, Instagram. And I think that's why I put, a lot of people have told me why you should just stick to physio, like don't worry about the resources, just see your patients, go home, and that's that. But if you look at what's happening in the world, I follow a lot of physio pages that probably are very technical, clinically sort of based. I saw my sort of contribution to our profession as maybe talking about the things that are around that. Like, yes, I do want to be a really good clinician, and I believe I have to be a really good clinician, but I think my educational piece is talking to you guys about something like this, which is more like life and career planning, not necessarily the 6x3 mobs that, I leave that to the people that are really, the best suited people. So I think you've got to build yourself a little toolbox, and then also surround yourself with people that can encourage you or support you, build a network for yourself, make meaningful connections. And I think that's what's really great about the internet. If I think of, I'm just looking at the page here, I think there's 4 people that I work with in sort of like a mentorship capacity that I know, and we've all met through social media. And my last hire was through social media. My next one's probably mine through B. So you can make a lot of meaningful connections. So use your resources. The world has changed and it's changing. And I would say the challenge for you guys would be to see where it's going to go next in the next 10 years. I don't think I'm going to be as much on the wave as I was in the early phase, but I'm going to leave that to you guys to see where physio goes. Maybe we doing purely virtual consults in the next 10 or 20 years. Maybe we, it's going to change. And if we're ready to change, and if we are, interacting, watching what our network's doing, seeing how social media and global trends are kind of going, we can kind of, stay ahead of it and stay relevant to it. So again, very broad answer, but use your resources. I think it's such an exciting time in the world where everything is online. You can connect with the best physio in Australia with a direct message, and they will probably reply to you. That's the world that we're living in. And it's flipping cool that is the world right now.
Yeah, it really is amazing. And that is something I think that's been a definite positive about COVID, even now, being able to have you talk to us. I'm in Joburg, you KZN. It's incredible. It actually leads me to another question I wanted to ask you. You were speaking about was titled State of the Physio Nation, the South African
Yes.
Nation. And
Yeah.
yeah, I think that emerging physios into this world where how do we, arise the importance of our profession, and how do we really take it to the next level? I've seen in the States and in Australia, physios are really they're really pushing the boundaries there, and they doing a lot of things. And in South Africa, I mean, we do obviously have the potential, but how do we really take those opportunities and take our healthcare system, our environment, our problems, and all the good things in this country, and how do we really take that forward and move it forward and create a place of growth and expansion in our profession?
I think it's harder for us than it is if we compare us to the US, UK, Australia, right? I think being a third world country has its sort of unique set of issues. And in that video, I was mainly kind of talking about the orthopedic and sports sort of space, and then predominantly private practice. So let me just touch on that, and then I'll give some comments in terms of public health, but I'm probably not the best placed person to be talking about public health. If you look at, or this is my experience, right? If when I looked at all my lecturers at university, and I kind of saw, bless them, but older, predominantly women. I was at Stellenbosch, so mainly Afrikaans as well. And then I looked at who was serving us on these committees and all these sorts of things. I just felt like there was no one really representing me as a person of color, as a young person, as a male, all these sorts of things, right? And I just kind of thought to myself, surely there's got to be, it's got to be different to what it is. Why is it like this? And then I move into private practice, and I kind of realize, okay, maybe this is why it is how it is because I think the business models is sort of set up wrong. There's exponentially more graduates leaving university every year, and it's increased by, I heard, you can correct me, Yocheved, my graduating fourth year class was about 30 or 40 students. I think, 30 max. I hear nowadays it's close to like 60, 80 graduating fourth year, times that by the amount of universities. So it's basically doubled in the space of that. I'm like out 9 years now, or 8 years. It's pretty crazy if you do the maths on that. So what's happening is we kind of having this like flood of young physios into the marketplace, but the business models that we've created isn't sustainable enough for everybody to have opportunities. What happens? You work for a big practice for 1 year or 2 years, and all of a sudden you then start to do your own thing. What happens over time, we end up with like what we're seeing on social media, especially in South Africa, we're having like thousands of single person practices. Nicholas Pereira Physiotherapy, like a solopreneur, they're calling it. And not that it's a bad thing, but it creates this kind of crabs in a bucket type of mentality where your practice doing well means my practice isn't doing well. And if you look at what's happening on like a society level, on an HPCSA level, there's a lot of infighting in physio, unfortunately. And we're also fighting with biokinetics, we're fighting with chiropractic, all that sort of stuff. And my question to everybody is that, why does it have to be like that? So I think us becoming like from a technical point of view, I think we're on par with the first world, absolutely. But from a operational point of view, I think that's where we've got to make up some ground. But if you look at, they've got the NHS, and they're in the US in sports physio, their salaries are probably better, and you can work for one organization and not have to do contract work and all that sort of stuff. So it's hard to compare. But from a research point of view, we really truly right up there. We just got to get some other things right in the meantime. And I'd say for us, myself included, I think we need to fix that. I think we're going to be the fixer generation of physio, because I do believe it's quite top heavy, and we will come up with creative solutions to try and fix that. And then with regards to public health, I think it's hard to move public health into a digital space for patients because of resources and boundaries like that. But I do believe there still are ways for us to innovate with, like, if we look at data list apps, or even if we go old school with like pamphlets and education. In the last webinar with UWC, I spoke about us having more of an emphasis of speaking South African languages so we can communicate more efficiently with our patients. So I think there's a lot of things to do, but the issue at the undergrad level is there's so much to cover. There's so little time. We need graduates to go out. It's impossible for you guys to cover absolutely everything. So it's a tricky situation. I think there must maybe be some curriculum changes. And then after that, I think we need to change some of the business parts of private practice. And then, yeah, hopefully public health will kind of move along with the times, although maybe a little bit delayed.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the fact that people are like go from a big practice then to a small, like to create a solo practice, is often because there isn't that growth in the practice, and just in terms of need, you have to go. I see there is a comment. Okay, so I think what Toby's trying to say is that in terms of like physio to patient ratios, South Africa, like let's say in the UK, I'm not sure on exactly the numbers, but we did have a lecture at some point about this, that there's, I'm just making up numbers, but let's say there's one physio for every 100 patients in the UK, and in South Africa, there's like one physio for every 2,000 patients. So yeah. I think what Toby's trying to say, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but we need, this in his word, in the flood of physios, but how can we create more opportunities and also improve, prevention, which I guess also goes back to your pamphlets, education, etc. But yeah, I don't know how can we really create a space for all these new physios?
I think Tumi's spot on. I think the only way we do make space for all the patients coming in is to focus on more preventative, like, models of healthcare, which is what we are not doing at the moment, right? We in a disease model, we in a reactive model to healthcare. But the problem is, to me, that I think all of us agree that that's what we need to do, but the powers that be aren't necessarily opening up enough opportunities to facilitate that. And maybe it's twofold. Maybe they are, but maybe there's not enough people that want to go into the areas that need physios to be. That could also be a realistic situation at the moment. But from what I've experienced and what I kind of see around me is that a lot of physios struggle to work in public health after their ComServe year. That was my situation. I would have 100% stayed in public health. I didn't actually have like crazy aspirations of doing sports physio. I kind of just I tripped and fell into that sort of road and then just kept on going with it. But I was a product of not having enough opportunities in public health. So it's a complex situation and there's a lot of factors to it, but you are spot on with, we need to move to a preventative model of healthcare because that's the only way that everybody is going to get employment. And I think an interesting, someone in this group did their 4th year project in terms of employability of post-ComServes. I think that was the topic. And it's actually quite a scary kind of scenario happening out there at the moment. So maybe it's government that need to open more posts for physios, or maybe we need to, emphasize the importance of our profession in the public health system. But yeah, there's a lot of moving parts to why we're in this situation at the moment.
Thank you. Moving on to a bit of a different topic. So at the moment, or I guess increasingly, there's been many people struggling with mental health challenges. Some people have even coined it the age of the mental health pandemic. And especially us as students, there are so many stresses at university, and with COVID, it's just added to that when it comes to fees or if it comes to passing, failing, there's so many external influences that really affect our mental health, and that's only from a university perspective. That's not even from personal at home capacity. And so those of you who follow, those of us who follow you on Instagram or have been following you kind of along your journey, know that you have had an experience with these challenges that so many of us have dealt with. And I was just wondering if you could kind of share with us different ways that we could, you know, be able to look out for ourselves or look out for our peers, and to be able to, you know, stop the stigma, get out there and kind of help before it becomes too late.
Yeah. I think it's also just weirdly enough, I think is it not Suicide Prevention Month as well? Or it was a prevention day early in the week that's passed. So I think it's kind of apt to probably speak about it. But it's, yeah, I think the aftermath of the whole pandemic is definitely going to be a fallout and long-term effects on a lot of people's mental health. But let's talk about the physios and students and young people. My personal experience through that period, when I said 2014, 2015, when I was just working in, you know, burning the candle at both ends, like whatever, 70 plus hours a week, traveling, working Saturday, Sunday, back in the practice, 8 o'clock in the morning on Monday, you know, going to a match, getting home at midnight, 7:30 the next morning. There was a lot of unhealthy sort of patterns that I was sort of picking up, and not that anybody should have stopped me, but I don't think I recognized the potential for things to go wrong at that point. Maybe we're a little bit more aware of those sort of triggers now, but long story short, sort of burnt myself out 2 years on end. And at the end of the second year, massive meltdown, was diagnosed with clinical depression, ended up seeing a psych about it, having to work through some things, doing CBT and all these sorts of interventions. And it kind of was like a big reality check for me in terms of, okay, this has happened. It's a bad thing. It's a problem, but look at it as a challenge or an obstacle. And now you can again learn a life skill for the rest of your life. So I think for me, I spoke about the toolkit of like things to do, and it's very personal for every individual, but I think it's our duty to ourselves to kind of figure out what those are. So if you're a student, maybe it's phoning your parents once a week at a set time, or twice a week, or thrice a week, or however many times you need to do that, or making a standing date with a friend where you don't do work, you just go do something else, or whether it's building exercise as a non-negotiable into your daily sort of, you know, your routine, or whatever it is that you need to keep yourself like energized and in balance. We need to cut the time to do that. And I know, like, when you're in finals and you got an unseen exam coming up and stuff, the last thing you're thinking about is doing that 30-minute run, or sticking to your appointment of having coffee with a friend, or that hour-long phone call that you have with your parents. But the paradox is, if you don't look after that sort of thing, right, or that part of your being, your performance outside on the other side is actually just diminishing. And for me, the scary thing was, I feel like at the height of my like struggle, my work performance, my care for patients, my like just general apathy, and obviously that comes along with being diagnosed with that, but was like at an all-time low. And I think that was a scary thing for me, just to realize, if I don't look after myself, I'm going to have nothing to give to other people. So we are in a profession that, like, at the end of the day, you might feel drained because you've given yourself to 12 people if you're a student working at a clinic, and then you've got to go study for an exam, and the patients expect something from you, the supervisor expects something from you, your parents expect you to pass. There's all these things that can kind of weigh on you. You need to also step back and create space, schedule space to look after you and do whatever it is that you need to do, whether it's run, eat, have a phone call, socialize, whatever. Yeah. And then in the interim, spend the time figuring out or write it down. What is it that I need to do? What are my non-negotiables?
Yeah, I think one of the things I was going to bring up with you is that sometimes it feels like as a student that, when it rains, it storms. And, you've got this test due, you've got a practical test, you've got this happening, and there's everything happening at one time. And it's hard to carry on. It's hard to say, I can do this and move on and carry on. But in terms of physio as a career, it is a very demanding career. I mean, I'm only a student, but I feel that I have given a lot of myself to certain patients, and you really put your all into your work, and it's a caring profession. And I see here that Tomi speaking about non-negotiables. And can you hear me?
Me or to me?
Yeah, can you hear me? Sorry, my screen just.
No worries. Yeah, I got
Sorry.
you.
So sometimes it is when everything feels like a non-negotiable, everything feels like you can't drop it. Like it's how do we, because I feel like this is how life's gonna be. Like it's not being a student.
Yeah. I think this is a tough one. So there's a book that really helped me with this, and I would recommend that if you're a reader, write it down because it's very useful. It's called Essentialism, and it's by a guy called Greg McKeown, or McKean. And it talks about many things in life are trivial and few things are vital. And the ability to sift through what is trivial, what is vital, I think that becomes the skill that we all need to kind of, grasp. Okay, I've got a deadline in 2 weeks' time. What can I do now to prepare for that? And yes, there's going to be don't get me wrong. I'm definitely not saying you must have your cake and eat it. But if you're complaining about there's so many things to do, right? But you've got time to go to the bar and have a drink on Saturday night or whatever. Maybe you should be cutting that out to do something else that fills you up before do you know what I mean? There's some things you can go without if you're really, really honest with yourself. And I think that's a hard conversation to have, but it's a personal one. You've got to audit your life almost and figure out what's trivial and what's essential. And then what are those, okay, I'm a student and I've got to get my degree. So what's vital for my degree? What's vital for me as a son to my family, if that's, in your really important, sphere of things. For me, what's important for me as a husband and dad now, as a business owner looking after people that work with me, what do I need to do today that moves those needles, and then everything else can do if I get time, or I'll schedule it when I get time. Does that make sense? I think it's hard to learn the skill set, I think, as at the end of your undergrad or during your undergrad. And there's a part of you that, again, not advocating burnout or whatever, but you kind of just need to embrace the messiness and just realize that if you approach it with the right mindset, you're going to get better at it over time. It's something that I didn't know this lesson, which is why I ended up in the position that I was in. But the obstacle led me to kind of grow my skill set, if you know what I mean. So yeah, it's tough, but you need to look inwards. I think that's in a nutshell.
Yeah, I think it's a very difficult task. When you have a profession such as physiotherapy, it's sometimes difficult to separate yourself or your personal responsibilities or kind of your personal life from the job. It's different to like a 9-to-5 accounting job where when you sit at your desk and you come home. How do you find the space to separate it? Do you separate it? How should we go about that after we qualify?
I still really struggle with that, to be honest with you. Like today was Sunday, okay? And what did I do today? I had to do some data capturing. So I'm sitting on my laptop watching the Formula One with my wife and my kid, and I'm doing work stuff, which isn't ideal, but in the season that I'm in right now, it's unfortunately part of it. Or it's the weekend and I'm sending rehab programs to some of the athletes that I work with. Again, not ideal, but it's part of what we do. Yo, I think for me, I'm a big one for like systems. Systems make things more efficient. Systems help to have boundaries and things like that. So I think that's why I've also built a lot of resources over time so that it helps me when I switch off, then I'm done with everything. The system will take care of the rest. I can open up the system again at 7:30 the next day or whatever, and I can switch off and have my sort of other time. But yeah, you need to work. Everything kind of needs to fit neatly in blocks of times. But I think even without doing that, your mind kind of wanders. I saw a brilliant like meme on Instagram where it shows like a person that can't sleep, and it's like a thought bubble, and it's like this person going into an archive of like videos or whatever, and it's basically saying, thinking about a patient that I couldn't fix from like 1999, and you whip that out in the middle of the night when you can't sleep. And that's what we do as physios, which is pretty crazy. But learning even just how to mentally switch off, right? Whether it's meditation, or when I'm out of my work clothes, I'm done, or when I pull up in the house, I'm done, kind of trying to create healthy boundaries for it. I think that's probably the best thing to learn to do, because if it all becomes a blur, you're going to battle and you might end up in the same position that I was. I think what helped me, to be honest, was when I had more things in my life to focus on other than just work. It helped me bring things into balance. But when I just poured everything into work, it's very easy to let it all consume you. And again, I'm not bitter about what happened because I grew a lot from it. I think that time that I sacrificed is now paying me back, but I could have probably done it a little bit smarter or differently. So boundaries, mentally switching off. I don't know if anybody uses like meditation or breath work, or but there's tools again that you can use to try and switch off.
So over here we have firstly, thank you. I think that is something that I need to, or all of us, I guess, need to learn how to do. But JJ over here is wishing you congrats, by the way, for your baby.
Thank you. I'm reading his or her message. Thank you, JJ.
So for people who can't see the chat, JJ is just asking how, like in such a crazy time, did Nick manage to hold on to the social aspect, especially with a family, and because he's saying that he saw physios who didn't have time or struggle to have time with their families. And I think this is also particularly with sports physios. I've seen one of our lecturers at the moment, or went to the Paralympics with the Paralympics team, and he said to us that he had to leave for 3 months at a time. So how do you cope with some of these challenges?
I think just in general, I would say the perception of sports physio is probably a little bit warped. So if anybody's here to learn about sports physio, make sure spend as much time figuring out if it is what you actually want it to be. And I think, like, case in point, sports physios are so busy that no one's really documenting their story of what it actually takes to do, what that is. I had a friend that walked away from a franchise rugby team where he was like on track to be the main guy in Super Rugby, and just from a life point of view was like, I want to have a kid, I want to enjoy time with my wife, I want to travel. So I'm going to say respectfully no. I could go on, this could be a whole webinar on its own, but for me personally, JJ, I think you've probably picked it up from now, but I'm like someone that likes order. I'm someone that likes like preparation. And I think my two keys that have helped me now, in particular with having my little one, is that I feel like since I've been on this journey from being like closer to your guys' age to now, I've been learning, and I think I've been preparing for opportunities like this. So it sounds funny that you're preparing when there's no opportunity in sight at all, but when it clicks and then you see how it works, it's fantastic. It's a really great feeling to say for my family that, okay, we set it up in a way that I can still have time and whatever, but it does really, again, point back to an inside job. So for me, one of my highest values is time, right? And it's time with my family, time with my loved ones, all that sort of thing. So I try and set up my professional life to allow me that time, whether it's I need to hire people to do admin or take stuff off my plate, or have more staff, or give opportunities to other people where I can step back and be more in management than actually doing the whole thing. I think that's something that I've learned in sports physio as well. I think a lot of people put in the work to be the main person, and then when they are the main person, they realize the responsibilities of being that person is immense, right? So I've got a different approach where I'm trying to create opportunities for a group of people or groups of people, and to be a part of it. And I'd rather be a small role player in a lot of people's journeys, where I can still have my highest value of time with my family, etc., and avoid burnout and do things like this. But yeah, I think my long answer, or the short answer, is that I've been preparing for a long time to kind of get into this space. I'm just looking through the questions again. Sorry. Thanks for the reading list, Q. I think, yeah, just go to my IG page and look at the reading list highlights, and then you can just message me and ask if you've got any more questions, but I've got a lot of stuff on there. I think, to me, if you were meaning to ask what are my non-negotiables, quickly, right off the bat, exercise is a non-negotiable. Whether I've got a race that I'm running or not, or an event that I'm training for, exercise is like a standard from a physiological point of view. What it does for my happy hormones and all that sort of stuff is like, it has to be a part of my life. Creating space, like I don't like the feeling of being overwhelmed. So I try and counter that with being organized, having structure, setting up a daily routine, having systems in place so that I avoid that overwhelmed kind of feeling. And then what I've also realized is I can work really hard for blocks of time. So one of my places of work is a school, and I try and sync a lot of my work schedule up per quarter so that I can have like work hard for 6 weeks, have a long weekend, work hard for 6 weeks, it's school holidays, and then I go to my other practice and just work half days, and I can kind of like recover in those little pieces. And then mandatory in my life, also non-negotiables, that I take a month off every year, and it's either the whole month of December, or this year it's probably going to be late or mid-December to mid-January, something like that. So, and these are things that I've built over time, and to be honest, it's a luxury for me to be able to do this. And I've created this life and work so that I can fit these things in that are valuable to me. I didn't have these for a lot of my first 10 years as well, and I had to work when I had to work. But again, if the vision is there, the sacrifice, is worth it. So again, you got to spend the time figuring out what it is that you want, what do you value, how are you going to get there? What's your journey going to be like?
That's very, very pertinent advice. And hopefully we'll be able to kind of figure that out sooner rather than later. So guys, if you do have any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself or to pop your hand up and ask. with pleasure, you can even ask in the chat box again. But Nick, just I guess one more question from me. So often, like, the way that we value ourselves or the way that other people value us are by our marks, or by how many, let's say, how many patients you treat in a day, or however, all of these very quantifiable things. And one of the things that I loved about, I can't remember which video it was, is that you said that it's not about the wins or the losers, it's actually about the bravery, but or the journey. But it's really difficult sometimes to acknowledge that within ourselves, because the way that everyone is valuing us is based on these external factors, or only these these little things that don't necessarily define us as a person, but that is how we are defined. And how do we go out of that mindset and be able to have the confidence within ourselves to know that we've done well, even, let's say, we didn't pass the test, or you didn't get cum laude, or you didn't get whatever, or stuff, but you really showed up? How do you actually accept that within yourself?
Let me tell you a story about me, and I've said it somewhere along the things, but I'll put it into one little piece for you. I failed my first year of university. I had to repeat the whole year because I failed one silly little module. Okay, super painful, but I learned from that and got through. Okay, then I had this chip on my shoulder that, oh, maybe I'm not good at test taking, or maybe I'm not good at this subject, or whatever. And that failure sits with me. Okay. In my final year, I failed my ICU final exam. Okay. So thank goodness I'm not working in that space now. But I think I'm proof that those things ultimately, in the grand scheme of things, it actually makes very little impact in your life. Like, when I hire people, or when I look at people that I want to work with, marks and stuff are great, but what I'm really looking for is like character, bravery. Have you had obstacles in your life that you've overcome? Those things for me are a lot more valuable, and maybe it's because it's closer to my journey as well. And I think, again, it's like the K53 situation, where at varsity you're being evaluated on a system that doesn't necessarily reflect your knowledge, right? I can guarantee you that I knew more than that one ICU exam, but then you sit with the feeling of, I'm a failure. Or I knew more than that one exam asked me in the beginning of my first year, but I suffered the embarrassment of repeating the whole year. And I kind of had to learn slowly and very painfully, because this stuck with me. It was the reason why I took so long to do my master's, because I thought I would suck at it. It's the reason why I failed my first test of my master's as well, because I was so like, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to do this type of thing. But I learned to shift my mindset. I think that's the long and short of the answer, where I measure myself not by what I score on the test, or, for me, three things really matter. Am I really caring about my patients and myself? And, care is one. Am I pursuing education, and am I educating people, my patients, myself, right? Whether it's formally, informally, doesn't matter. And am I trying my hardest to be at a level of excellence? And that's the only three things that matter. And if I can, at the end of the day, pitch up and say, I cared about the people, maybe I made the wrong decisions, and I still make wrong decisions now. I still make mistakes. But if I know that I'm ticking those three boxes, or trying, you know what, it's actually not that bad. I'm going to chalk it off, and I'm going to try again tomorrow. So I think we just need to shift our, we care so much what lecturers think, but just do the maths. It's logical. Your one unseen exam that you're going to have at the end of fourth year, right, is going to test you on this much knowledge, but you've had 4 years of information. It would be silly to if you get a distinction on that, to think that you are the bee's knees. It would also be stupid to think that if you fail that you are a terrible physio. So maybe that's the answer. Like, there's been brilliant people with a lot better marks than me from undergrad are not actually physios anymore. And people that failed a lot through me, like me, and are still somehow just plodding along. Like, there's maybe something in this plod along and just, find your way as you go type of approach.
Yeah, it's a hard thing to live by, but I think once we can like get into that mindset, it helps a lot because it does sometimes feel, that you are your marks. Ine has
Yeah.
a question.
Cool, thank you so much. And thank you so much, Nick, for your time. I kind of have two questions relating to what you just said. So myself as well, this year I kind of had a block where I didn't do very well. It was the first time I've ever like actually failed anything for physio. So that really like brought my confidence down. And with me, like you said, you kind of want to learn from all of your experience as you go along. So I personally like to take the comments we get at the end of our clinical exams, take whatever, not negative comments, but kind of what you did wrong and apply it to the next block to improve. But I mean, each block you get there and it's always just a new negative comment. So how do you stay confident if you're just getting negative comments the whole time? And how do you like improve your confidence as a physio? Like at what point do you feel confident in your treatment?
Oof. It's a tricky one, right? And again, I would probably be more critical of the system than anything else. You know what I mean? Because the system's making you feel like you are less than, which the fact that you care about it and you're wanting to learn is actually, not the case. So I would say take it with a heavy pinch of salt, firstly. Okay. And then I would say, besides just the comments, maybe spend time with whoever your marker is, and like literally have like a 10-minute conversation and unpack it. And maybe I think clarity is kindness, right? And if you can ask them to be really clear on what they mean or how you mean, and you can, not defend your point of view or why you think you're right, but go in with an open mind and discuss it. Maybe you find that even the way that they set it on paper doesn't reflect what they actually think of your ability as well. You know what I mean? Even the medium of reading a comment and trying to just apply that, maybe that isn't deep enough. Maybe it needs to be